I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome to our program. This is our first segment of the political edge. And this is going to be totally Christian focused, world focused, even some Bible prophecy will be mingled in. And don't forget that you can find us on dontletthemburn.com. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, if they keep us on there. You know, it's starting to get a little hectic with all the censorship. You could also find us on BitChute and other social media platforms. But the website is the main hub, and we're working on a few things. In fact, we're working on a documentary. If you didn't know that, you could check out the trailer on our YouTube page. We also came out with a song. It's called Genetic Apocalypse, which is basically bringing awareness to the genetic manipulation of mankind. And we just did a show on that on our other segment called Reign of the Tech, featuring Pastor Billy Crone. Now, today, we have one of my friends, Mark Sutherland, and we met at Hear the Watchman last September in California. I think it was Irvine, California, right? And so we've been building a relationship, and finally we got to schedule a program, and here we are. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, my brother. It was fantastic to see you. I'm looking forward to having a good discussion about what is going on in the world, my brother.
Absolutely. And I guess you can take it where you're on the other side of the world. You're in Europe. So many of us, we're in this box of the American culture and what's going on here with Trump and everything else, COVID and all these other things. But since we don't live there, we can't really get the full scope unless we go on YouTube and watch a ton of videos. So if you can enlighten people to what's going on over there, that'll be great.
Well, let's put a historical context to the recent events. So on the 19th of March, on a UK government website, they actually downgraded COVID-19 from a highly infectious disease to a not so highly infectious disease. And then on the 24th, 25th of March, we then went into lockdown, and we were supposed to be flattening the curve for 3 weeks a month. And as Boris Johnson tried to say, look, everybody, just be careful, social distance. And then suddenly we went into this lockdown, which we've only just begun, we could say, a few weeks ago to come out. But by going into this lockdown, you pushed half the working population off a cliff into now being reliant on government handouts and work just completely drying up. And I would say that for myself as well. And say the film and television industry going off a cliff, blah, 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 blah. That is appalling. We're then seeing private businesses go to the wall left, right, and center. We've seen the government paying for the furlough of workers, and that will go on right up until October. So, and then suddenly we have a mini housing boom, as suddenly it was all released. There was this backlog of houses ready to sell, and suddenly prices are going through the roof, and there's demands, etc., etc. And in the time in that regard, economically, what's happened is that banks have then turned around and gone in regard to mortgages. It's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get a mortgage. We need more than 10% deposit. We're now talking about 15% plus. And then we have in the press saying, there's a housing boom. It seems to be going on. And then suddenly the realization right now, as certain people are starting to realize that actually the boom is potential. We're going to see a bubble happen. We're going to see this bubble burst. And because the fact is that people are going to be, there's just going to be mass unemployment. We've seen the GDP shrink so much, the gross domestic product. Yeah. And we're going to see this mass unemployment. Now, tied in with that, there have been more and more and more people waking up to what is going on, because they then have realized that this is a pandemic. Yeah. We remember, let's put it in context. Our friend L.A. Marzulli did an interview with Celeste Salom, where Celeste revealed the Economic Forum 2020 website. It all panned out. There was one section on COVID-19. We reflect on the fact that it was Event 201 in New York last September, October, when they rolled all it out. Now, in the beginning, it took so many people were going, no, there has to be something in this. Something has been released from a lab in Wuhan, and we see the fact that they built this hospital in a very quick space of time. We were seeing people thrown in to morgues to be, people cremations and all that. We saw all these Chinese people falling down in the street, etc., etc. And now, as we look back, we question the load of that. We wonder if this has just been a load of theatre and all this kind of thing. And it's very, very, very serious events, because then some of us have come to the conclusion it's like a fourth generation attack on the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
And we've then seen in this country Boris Johnson, who's supposed to be a leader of the Conservative Party. He then had an 80-seat majority, then suddenly put in such draconian laws in regard to lockdown. Now, on a personal level, I have actually emailed a member of parliament about 27 times. I've had derisory replies, no real replies to that. And as I pointed out to that particular MP, that I then know more about what's going on than he does. Now, there was a huge rally in Trafalgar Square last weekend. There was about 40,000 people there. There is other little pockets of lockdown expression of resistance to say, people, this is what is really going on. Then we discover people like Matt Hancock, our health minister. This is the key thing. They then have relationships with people like Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab is the head of the Economic Forum 2020 Reset. He wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And Klaus Schwab, there he is. And Matt Hancock is going, oh, my mate Klaus. And there was an article on a government website in October 2017 expressing their his respect for Klaus. And then suddenly, in October 2009, I think 2019, talking about COVID and all the rest and all this kind of thing. And then we discover within our own government who has got links with, GlaxoSmithKline, AstraZeneca, and all this kind of thing. And then we have the chief medical officer, Whitty. We discover through amazing research done by Amazing Polly that there's all these links with Bill Gates and all this.
Right.
And there is this huge, huge disconnect. And it was played out yesterday on ITV in Good Morning Britain, where Piers Morgan, that man that loves guns in America, he then is one of the presenters of GMB, and he was attacking Piers Corbyn. Now, Piers Corbyn is the brother of Jeremy Corbyn, who used to lead the Labour Party. But Piers has a scientific background. He questions climate change, and he seriously questions all this tyranny. And they have, on the television, of course, we've seen it, this propaganda. In other words, Chris, this whole rollout from New York in Event 201, they have hijacked everything and rolled out everything. And we are living in perilous times. We're about to see an economic collapse like no other. It's going to be worse than the Great Depression. We're seeing this. We're just going to see this unfold. And of course, this is totally and utterly avoidable. But the key thing is, when we've got advisors like Dominic Cummings next door to Boris Johnson, and I've begun to wake up to this when I then found out that in 2014, he attended a conference in California where you and I met last October, and he attended what's called the SciFu conference. You and I need to look into that. And at the SciFu conference, it was on his blog, and he made a comment about, androids and all these little drones being able to go up and swarm, and maybe they'll be able to assassinate people and all that. And then we think of the film of Gerard Butler, the President Down and all this, and where he pushes Morgan Freeman into the river to save the president's life because there is this pack of drones flying over to attack the president. Now, why would Cummings make comments about this, make comments about, the science of this, and even making a comment of as a little bit of a giggle? And then we have to remind ourselves, and this was a shock to me as well when I think about it, that in 2006, last year, 2019, round about September, there's Boris Johnson giving a talk at the UN, and he's bestowing the delights of tech and all this, and talking about nanotechnology coming into our bodies so that doctors could spy on us, what our bodies are doing and all this. And of course, then there's this push for all smart cities. Now, saying that, we have then got, and here's the key thing when we talk about biblical prophecy, because what's happened here within this country is the church is nowhere to be seen within the mainstream church. The Archbishop of Canterbury is not calling for a day of prayer. I'm trying to be polite. We have then got individuals. Of course, there is a remnant body here, and there are certain individuals who are awake. There are certain ministers who are awake, or maybe two that I know of, one particularly, who's a personal friend of mine. So suddenly it's like, what is the church? We've got a load of these people that have swallowed this Kool-Aid. I mean, a very dear friend of mine who is awake, his church minister said to him, "Oh, do you think we're in the end times?" He's actually asking my friend, and he's supposed to be the church leader. And my friend turned around and said, "Well, of course we are. Yes, I believe that." But then suddenly they're all believing the social distancing and all believing this, and they're all believing that COVID-19 is real. But that is because they do not do the research that we do. They do not then go online and connect with the people that we do. And Hosea 4 verse 6 clearly says, my people are destroyed through lack of knowledge. But also, my people are destroyed because they cannot be bothered to look at this. And here's the key thing, because theologically, they have swallowed the social gospel. Marxism, communism has invaded the church in regard to saying, right, excuse me, I want to change my hand, has invaded the church and turning around and going, well, we're swallowing this Marxist utopian dream. And that has what has gone on. So I'm linking politically, and if Ephesians 6, we turn around and say we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. And we see how the principalities and powers have completely invaded our political system. That is where the spiritual battle is going on. And just finally, sort of take a breath. We have to remember as a country that in 2016, we voted to leave the EU. We then spent 4 years fighting our own country, our own parliament over this. 4 years fighting our own parliament over this. And then eventually we leave, and everyone on the 31st of January is celebrating. But when I was here, the Watchman in March, and I came back from Dallas, and then within minutes, President Trump banned flights from the UK, I felt it was like a sucker punch to my stomach. I got really totally kicked. And it was a case of, oh my goodness, I can't fly out. And then the whole point is that we have to join all these dots and all these events up to what's going on. And then suddenly, we've had all these doctors, Dr. Kaufman, Dr. Patar, Sherry Tenpenny, dear friend of mine over here, Kate Shamaneri as well. And we've had Dr. Shiva, Dr. Bukati, and we've then had a well-known journalist called Peter Hitchens, who from day one has been questioning all this, because we have gone into tyranny. And I just want to link up something here.
Mhm.
Yes, yesterday, by the time people see this, look it up. Look at what's happening in Australia. In Australia,
Oh yeah.
in the state of Victoria, and Dan Andrews is behaving as if he's some dictator, and we just wonder why. And of course, we then wonder why, because Belton Road and his links with China. And we look at how the Darwin Harbour has been leased to a company that's mainly owned by the Chinese, etc. So
Mhm.
this is what's going on. And then suddenly, on someone sent me an Instagram, Avenue Zero, a certain part of Canada near the American border, I believe. There's a group of Chinese troops marching along. A friend of mine has verified the footage.
Yeah.
Now, what is all of this about? And as I reflect, Chris, from the outside, I've then seen your country, a country that I love to bits, and with your proud constitution, where people have just swallowed this and gone, well, I'll just give my civil liberties up all over the place.
Yeah.
And of course, we've had that over here. But, the land of the free, the land of the brave, what has actually happened? And then we've seen, churches fold, church leaders fold, left, right, and center, and all this. I mean, what the heck is going on here with the United States as well? Because whatever people think, the president of the United States is always viewed as the leader of the free world. And then I'm reflecting from here where, within papers like The Guardian, that bastion of conservatism, not totally left wing. And then we have seen the bias within that, the bias within the independent newspaper and others within television and other news of just constantly being anti-Trump, anti-Trump, anti-Trump. And it's reflecting on the fact that we've also had all these Black Lives Matter marches and
Mhm.
all of this. It seems that seems an acceptable way to behave, which is not. We then have still got illegal immigrants coming over the channel to Dover. There was 409, I think, either, over the last day or so in one day. I could go on, but I'm just painting a picture of where we are at, and it is not good. And one of the reasons of shutting down churches, of course, and people they will not accept that we are in the end times, Chris. They
Right.
will not accept it
Yeah.
because of the fact that this has not been taught.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good point. And I say it a lot. A lot of these churches are not teaching Bible prophecies for all sorts of different reasons. They say, "Oh, well, you're crazy," or "you'll go crazy for reading the Book of Revelation." All sorts of excuses.
Mm,
And many of these, so-called pastors haven't even been trained in the area, so how can they
yeah,
teach it? And then the
yeah,
Bible says that we are supposed to teach the whole counsel of God,
mm,
by prophecies, the whole Bible, right? At least a majority of it. So it's a shame that people that need to know can't find out because their leadership is just dropping the ball, teaching this stuff.
mm.
Because so many things are happening right now. You got peace deals and all. It might not be the great peace deal that the Antichrist comes and ratifies, but it's still significant. But when you go into that area and people, if they don't know the information behind what you're saying, you just lose them. You know.
Well, absolutely. And what we have over here is massive replacement theology. I mean,
Hmm.
that, as you say, that deal is not the peace deal, but it is steps along the road. And of course, as we see, Israel then have relations with the United Arab Emirates. The Saudis are behind that. Various things that have been going on, as Amir Sapadi has pointed out, in regard to certain islands with near Yemen and all this kind of thing. And other countries are going to come on board. And this is the run up to that. And in regard to Ezekiel 30, 38, 39, 37, 38, 39, and all of that, we're going to see certain events unfold. But none of this, my dear brother, is taught in churches because they believe, I mean, there's certain historical things in regard to that, but they then in the past, during the leading up to the Second World War, there was a huge movement of within British churches where they believed that they were the New Jerusalem and all this, and then the incredible founding of Israel in 1948. So we see the fact that we have to remember that a third of the Bible is biblical prophecy. And with that, then we have to remember that Jesus is going to return, and we have to remember that, and we have to know that there is going to be a personal judgment, and we all have to stand before him. That's the truth of it. But it seems that the Joel Osteen Brigade, and I'm going to call them out, and the Hillsong Brigade, and the Bethel type brigade, and the New Apostolic Movement, Reformation, whatever, all of that lot, they then believe that it's your best life now, or in Joel Osteen's case, it's your best riot now, because he has been on a BLM march with Beth Moore or whatever, and all this kind of thing. So where is the theology? And also it's like, oh, you're going to have this amazing lifestyle and all this kind of thing. We're questioning so much of that because, as a dear friend of mine said over here, a church leader is there to prepare the congregation for martyrdom.
Right.
This is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable stuff, isn't it? And as Tom Horn wrote that book, Blood on the Altar, the fact that our supposed, inverted commas, brothers and sisters, they would shop us. They would turn around and say, well, you're a fundamental Christian. You believe in what the Bible says. Yes. I mean, I, on a personal level, have been called that,
There's a saying I came up with. I keep coming up with these sayings, but there are three types of people in a war. The ones that want tyranny, you already know what they want, right? Ones that want freedom, right? And the ones in the middle are the ones that are indifferent. I don't care where it goes, as long as I'm safe. And that's what you see with some of these pastors, political despots, and the people that'll capitulate or bend a knee or whatever. Those are the more dangerous people, because you don't know where they're going to go. You don't know when they're going to turn on you. They're all disconnected from history, disconnected from a lot of theology, and on a regular level, the unsaved, they're dumbed down or uneducated to a degree. All sorts of ingredients to the recipe, to where they will bow down to the next regime, and it's repeated over and over and over, from Russia to China to Europe at a time. And now what we're seeing is this uprising in America. And the first thing they have to get rid of is the church, because the church is that center of morality.
Yeah.
And but alongside that, what you're seeing is a rise of occultism within Black Lives Matter, within the the Wicca, the witchcraft, and all that stuff. I mean, that's another subject, but there's so much going on right now. And since people are basically busy with their daily lives, they, like you said, they don't get to see the stuff we see. We get to research this stuff on different levels. And when they don't see that, and you come to them with information, some of them will listen, but they still have that programming in there.
Absolutely.
And they'll say something ridiculous. They're like, what? Weren't you hearing me? And so what's going on right now around the world, but right now, in America, it's a big wake-up call to freedom. Because if we don't stand, we will fall. And I'm pretty optimistic that things will turn around to a degree. But at the same time, people need to wake up and resist what's going on right now? Because it's pretty obvious what's going on. Go ahead.
Well, they need to. We need them to wake up, and we need them to resist. Because if America goes down, then the whole of Western civilization goes down. Now, we also then have biblical prophecy, and we can clearly argue that, as it says, America is not mentioned in the end times. The UK is not mentioned in the end times, unless we turn around and say that we're the merchant of Tarshish and the lions thereof. So it's not there. And I, on a personal basis, I'll be honest, I don't want to accept the fact that, oh, well, we'll just let the whole thing go to hell in a handcart, and we don't want people to resist. We do need people to resist, and we don't want to see the violence and all the rest. But the fact is when we have a situation when we go on to, Antifa website, and then it's linked to the Democrats, it's linked to Biden in that sense. When you then go to give money to BLM, Black Lives Matter, and then you suddenly find yourself on a front group called Act Blue, which is then linked to Biden and linked to the Democrats. You can't make any of this up, because you then have to go back to how that Obama weaponized, let's say it, he weaponized race. He did. Tyrone Martin and all that. I think the comment was, you'll have a son like him, or I would have a son like him, etc. And then suddenly we then have events, how that has unfolded and what's gone on. So when a very dear friend of mine, David Summerall from stophate.com, someone that you need to interview, who then started Stop Hate in 1992, who out of the LA riots of Rodney King and all that, who is a committed Christian, who is on the same page with various things that we are discussing, who is a Republican, who is, a President Trump supporter, but then talks about the fact that within Washington, D.C., we then have two wings of the same bird, the left and the perceived right, and how they've played this constantly. And he then talks about what happened in 1992 and how, in regard to the court case of Rodney King, how the press pushed certain things, etc., etc., etc. And the playbook then doesn't change. And of course, one of the biggest sort of, it's the way that suddenly propaganda is allowed again within the media. They're not journalists, they're not reporting facts of what's going on. So if we then take Waco, Chris, and having had the privilege to be on his program in the past, but if you take then John B. Wells, who was regularly on Coast to Coast, and then his, of course, Caravan to Midnight, which he's got. And I remember John B. Wells is talking about this, where John B. goes, he used to work for CBS, and there he is asked to do a voiceover for the Waco incident. And then as he comes down the stairs and sees it on the big screen, and then it says live at Waco. And you're going, well, hold on a minute. How can you be live at Waco when I've just recorded a voiceover for this? And that is when the penny dropped. So we have to go back to the whole thing of history. And where we're at in this situation, and my friend David Summerall was talking about on stophate.com, is talking about the whole manipulation of the press, and we see how the press is being manipulated. But this whole situation is, we go back to the Second World War, we go back to Hitler, we go back to these IG Farben and these big pharmaceutical, this big cartel that got together, IG Farben, that then had its own private little factory, really, of experimentation inside Auschwitz. They're then funding the Dr. Mengele experiments on the Jewish people and all of this. You cannot make any of this up. And then, Mengele had an obsession with twins, whether that then led on to cloning. You then go on and you then realize that Vernon von Braun, who was head of Hitler's rocketry, then becomes the head of NASA within America. What does all of this mean? So Hitler was going for a final solution to exterminate, 5 million Jews and others, gypsies and all the rest.
Yeah.
That's what he was pushing. Cyclone B is then pushed into gas chambers, but it's made by IG Fairbairn.
Yeah.
And this whole company, and then you come forward spiritually to the fact that they have then pushing through this grid, this control grid that they are trying to then build. Excuse me. And that goes on to 5G, goes on to all the technology. And then, of course, the Georgia Guidestones have said, well, we want to bring the population to 500 million and all this kind of thing. And everyone's going, yeah, poo poo. And then they turn around and go, hold on a minute. How are they going to do that? It's called vaccines. We're going to vaccinate people. And then suddenly, Mr. Gates, the man that put viruses on our computer, who has no medical certification at all, a bit like the man who's head of the WHO, but a very, very good friends with, Ping, the leader of China, along with Klaus Schwab, who's head of the Economic Forum 2020, who's also a very, very good friend of, Klaus Schwab. You cannot make any of this up.
Yeah.
And
So
people are ignorant to all of this, Chris.
yeah, yes, indeed. Because it's it's very convoluted, very hard to follow. But when you start getting the pieces together, you see a huge picture, and you have to line it up with the Bible to really get the main ultimate picture. You said a lot, and I'm not sure. A lot of our audience, they're up to speed on some of this, and some aren't. And you mentioned some historical things, some things dealing with technology. The system that's being used. Okay, so we have the spiritual realm, and then below that we have the people that actually worship Lucifer.
Yep.
And of course, we have the sin nature that can't be understated. But so you have those people that worship Lucifer, and it's a small group of people. You can call them whatever you want: Illuminati, the secret, not the secret, but the power elite, the order, globalists, whatever. They go by many names. And under they control all the money. Under them, they have underlings, and then the underlings under those underlings don't really know as much as the ones above them. And so it's a nice network of corporate power, banking power, and military power, and on and on and on. Now, God is in control. They don't control everything. They would like to, and eventually, it's going to happen to bring in the Antichrist. But I'm bringing all that up so that people understand there is a spiritual component to this. It's not just, these people aren't just doing it willy-nilly. It's a big plan from the spiritual realm, and it's been around for hundreds of years. Okay. And the whole plan has been implemented, like I said before, in Russia, in China, and other places, Venezuela, even some of the islands in the Caribbean, but to a lesser degree. Now, with all the stuff that went on with Hitler, you had Operation Paperclip. You could look that up. And the other countries took some scientists too, but America took a bunch of the scientists as well. And we started making advances from there because they were highly advanced. Plus, Hitler was into the occult. And he was also placed there by the power elite. The Mein Kampf and all that, some say that he didn't even write that book, but his name is on it. So once you start getting these pieces together, I'm telling you, it makes a lot of sense. And it's not conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory, the term was made up by the CIA around the time of JFK's death to disqualify anyone coming out with the truth. So you make them look like a wacko. Okay. So right now, what you see going on around the world. It's a part of this whole global plan to have their 10-nation kingdom. So what they're doing with America is, if you start to study the history, especially what happened in Germany, it's the same operation. And they always use minorities or the poor or whatever to carry out their plans. These are the proxies, right? And the people that end up carrying out the plan, they don't stay alive. If you didn't notice, they die, right? So they don't want somebody else to uprise against them later on. So they'll wipe them out, right? And so right now they're using Antifa, they're using Black Lives Matter, um, and other politicians, because they probably have dirt on them, and
Yes. Yeah.
to get this whole movement going. And so even if they're reluctant, they have no choice because they're in a corner. But for the most part, some of these people have gone under Marxist, communist, whatever you want to call it, training. And this is a whole satanic system that works. It works to topple governments. The uprising, we can go back to the French Revolution. It's the same people, same families, okay? And I'm not making this stuff up. There's tons of books
No.
on this stuff. Tons
No,
of
you're
books.
not. You're not. And Rupert Darwell wrote a book called Green Tyranny, and at the front of that book, in the preface, he says that the piece of paper that stands in the way of global tyranny is the Constitution of the United States. Now, your Constitution was written in September 1787, ratified then, after having a little fracas with us at 1776. We then have to jump and see, I think that in 1797, I think it was the French Revolution. So one revolution, of course, the 1776 revolution, to me, was with God, and because the biggest regiment that the British feared were the black and whites, who were the black and white regiment, who were the preachers in pulpits. The French Revolution was without God, period.
Yeah.
So we have to, and then suddenly it's like Rousseau and all this, and this sort of Nietzsche and this philosophical thinking that has then been pushed through and has then been the center of Europe in that sense.
Yeah.
So we have to bear all this in mind, and you're absolutely right. And people need to join the dots. But I think you said a very, very interesting thing where you have this third group. You don't know how they're going to play it. They want to walk a middle line. You can't walk a middle line. I'm really, really sorry, but this is a time when you're going to have to choose sides. You really are.
Yeah.
And it's profoundly, when you choose sides, it is profoundly costly. And there is a huge gap within the theology. And of course, as I have had this abuse, and so have you, in the fact that when people say, oh, it's all about love. We just got to love everyone. It's all about love. Yeah, okay. Well, love is actually speaking the truth, is telling the truth. And if you do not like the truth, then there's not a lot I can do about that. But that's the truth. It's there. It's speaking. So we are in this situation because biblical prophecy talks about that, the way certain things are unfolding. Of that, there is no doubt. But we are also a load of people are reacting to it out of sheer ignorance. So if you take the Black Lives Matter movement, as Bishop Larry has talked about this, and other people, this goes back to, you can go back to Egyptian times, three little sculptured dolls of them kneeling and then putting one arm up. The fact that the leaders of BLM in America have said that they are into witchcraft within, that has African roots. Then let's go to this, television programming. programming. We see the films that have gone on and all of this kind of thing. And then we've seen the massive, the indoctrination, the fact that you do in your country, you do have a big homeschool movement. Well, that homeschool movement is about to grow 10, 20, 30, 40, 100-fold because people have then realized what their children are being taught in schools, which is going into hold of, a load of LGBT rights and all the rest. And there's grooming. And it's like, oh my goodness, it's everything that is pushing that is then ungodly.
Now that you said that, let's bring this other monster into the picture. It's called the United Nations. A lot of things that you're witnessing happen. It's been happening for, I think, since a little bit before 2015, with all the alternative lifestyles, drag queens teaching your kids. It's been rising since the so-called legalization of homosexual marriage. And so Christians were warning for years, the moment you do something like that, guess what's going to happen? Everything else is going to come out the woodworks. And that's what's been happening.
Pandora's box. Yeah.
Exactly. And so don't be ignorant about the United Nations. Their headquarters is it's just a hotbed of a lot of stuff going on. Gun control came from them. Okay. And that plan goes back to the original plan that we were talking about before, where they've toppled governments through this. You take away the weapons first. I don't care if it's swords or guns. It's the same plan. And once they disarm you, they can rule you. Okay. So there's a big movement to get rid of the guns in America, and they're trying certain little tricks. I'm not going to go into that right now, but bear in mind that's the stuff you see going on with these mass shootings. Investigate it more. Don't just see what believe what the media is telling you, because there's usually drugs involved or somebody connected to somebody. I don't want to make it seem like everything is this ultimate plot, but listen, anything planned that's evil, that passes beyond one person, that's called a conspiracy. All right. So please bear in mind that the United Nations is behind a lot. We're talking about the environmental system, the environmental movement, which goes back to Gaia worship, whole bunch of occult stuff. Okay. So it's a big spiritual movement beyond what you see face value. All right. This includes the dumbing down of our kids, the basic destruction of our education system, because now they've brought in, what's that thing called? The
Common Core.
Yeah. That is a Marxist program. Okay. They want to disrupt the way you think. The wrong speak that you could find in 1984, but leave that out the picture for a second. But the wrong speech, the political correctness, start to define the terms, and see what it really means. When you hear progressivism, there's nothing wrong with the word, right? But what does it mean for them? It means that they progress towards their goal of world domination. You keep hearing the word democracy. We're in a democracy.
No, you're not.
Program. Exactly. And one other thing is, like you were mentioning earlier about the media.
Can I just say, Chris, can I just jump in? You are a representative constitutional republic. You're a representative republic. You are not a democracy. And all the progressives use that word constantly.
Yeah. Yes. And all of this stuff is spread through your media and your educational system, right? And it used to be that 6 media companies, as far as America goes, owned most of our entertainment, books, you name it. 6 corporations. It's starting to dwindle down. I think it's only 4 now. I'll have to double check my facts, but I know it's not 6 anymore, because Disney has bought out Fox, and Comcast has bought out, I think, Warner Brothers. So imagine now, this system was already controlled, already very fine-tuned, control for their narrative. And so there's a process called mind control. And I know some people might roll their eyes to this, but it's real, okay? You can go back to the CIA, MK Ultra, and there are other programs as well. But today, some of us know it as neuro-linguistic processing.
Program,
Or programming, right?
Absolutely.
And so remember, COVID was supposed to be a surprise to everyone, right? This thing, it's here, but they had a whole conference about it, right? In I think October of 2019.
Event 201. Yeah.
So when it hits, we hear new normal, new normal everywhere, new normal. When you're programming somebody with mind control, you have to repeat things. It's the same thing you find in false religions. You have to say these chants, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. Then you start to obey. The mask, they say it's for your safety, right? And the safety of others, when they're on record saying that it doesn't work. Okay? But there's a funny thing that happened in Nazi Germany when the Jews were getting on these train. They told them it was for their good. And then they ended up dead, right? I know we haven't gone that far, but it's the same control mechanism for the mind. You understand? That's where I'm going with all this. You have to understand that you're being brainwashed. I tell very smart people some of this information, and they can't get it because they have to get the programming out first. Okay, so go ahead.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. We have neuro-linguistic programming over here. It's what's called common purpose. A lot of people that work in the BBC have done common purpose training courses, the same in the NHS, and most will be a number of politicians have. And you are basically training people to think beyond authority. So these people thought that we would never ever vote to leave the EU. The fact that 17,410,752 people did, with a majority of over 1 million voted to leave the European Union.
Yeah.
That is what happened. And because in 1973, when we joined, we lost the sovereignty of this country. And that has never, ever been fully explained, but it is true. And then people deny that. And then we suddenly realize that within all the political parties within our parliament, the Conservatives, the Labour, the Liberal, the Welsh Nats, the Scottish Nats, the Greens, and all the rest, they're all saying, if I've left anyone out, they're all saying, members of their party going, oh, we shouldn't leave the EU, it'd be terrible. Well, if they're all saying this, and they're all supposed to be part of different political parties, it means that suddenly I'm living in a communist country because they're saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, you're right in regard to the UN. And of course, and then we have to remember Rockefeller, Project Lockstep. Project Lockstep. They have worked all of this out. They have said this, Project Lockstep, constantly. So we have to think about that. What does this mean? What does this actually mean? It meant that 10 years ago, this was all written. It's all hidden. And of course, people don't believe us. It's a bit like turning around and saying it didn't suit people. But in regard to oil is a substance. I'm going to go there. And now we're going to blow the science apart. No, it's not fossilized fuel, not made from that. Trees, going and then disintegrating and et cetera, and then making oil. No, it's a substance that's made in earth and it doesn't run out. The oil wells dry up, and then over time they will refill. It's a natural substance, but of course it didn't suit, Rockefellers or whatever, turning around and going, oh, just out of interest, no, we'll say that oil is is a finite fuel, because then that just keeps the price up. So in other words, we look at that. We then look at Tesla's free energy. Now, all right, he was into certain things that you and I may disapprove of, but it's out there. History is completely and utterly rewritten, and that, of course, is neuro-linguistic programming.
Right.
We change how people are going to view things, and that we then over here, Julia Middleton in 1989 set up Common Purpose. She then found herself within having a office within John Prescott's office. John Prescott was Deputy Prime Minister under Tony Blair from 1997. You can't make any of this up. Remember Blair a couple of months ago, Gordon Brown a couple of months ago, saying, well, we need a world government to sort this problem out. Suddenly Tony Blair in the press is going, oh, we need a digital ID.
Mm-hmm.
Go away, mate.
Yeah.
Go away. The
Yeah.
fact that, you create a sexed up dossier so that we could invade Iraq in 2003 and all this kind of thing. No, just go away, you pain in the bum. You are a complete and utter globalist shill. Of that, there is no doubt.
Right. And are they planning on bringing contact tracing to where you are?
We do have contact. They have tried to bring in contact tracing overnight, including this phone, other people's phones. Suddenly, contact tracing software suddenly appears on people's phones. You can't make that up either, Chris.
Yeah. Let me explain something to people, okay? And I'm sorry to always keep going back to Nazi Germany, okay?
Mm.
But Hitler had something called the brown shirts, and these were like a police force that was more social. It wasn't, what you call federal, right? Now, with the contact tracers, now people, when I tell you what I'm going to tell you, go and look it up, okay? What they plan on doing is using these contact tracers. Right now, it's seems like it's going to be in the blue states before if they ever get it through. And your phone, Apple keeps trying to get me to update my phone. I don't do it, and they will have all sorts of points of data about whoever you've been around, and then they can come to your home and test you for COVID. And if you're positive, they'll quarantine you, right? And if you resist, they can take you away. Right? Now, if you're quarantined for, say, 2 weeks and you go back out and you're around people that are so-called positive, guess what? The cycle continues and on and on and on. Now, wait. So this is like a police force here, okay? And some of them will have police with them. Now, check this out. There's something called the Strong Cities Network.
Yep.
Obama talked about it. I think her name, Loretta Lynch, talked about it.
Yeah.
And it's the same program. It's a global police force held up by the United Nations. So imagine this scenario. You have your local police, you have your military and whatever, and they're a part of our nationality. But this police force belongs to the UN. They don't have to answer to our Constitution.
No.
At all.
No.
Think about that. Go research it for yourself. They have a website. There's other articles about it.
All they have to do, potentially, as a dear friend of mine explained, is maybe get a load of Somalians in Minnesota and give them UN uniforms inside America. Okay, let's just throw that out.
That's another good point too, because what the same system, just call it a system, have used in the past is mass immigration. When you hear about Trump banning certain Muslim countries from coming in, or the border all this other stuff. It's about mass immigration because we're getting flooded with Somalians and other people in the Obama regime. That's on purpose. It's not about the freedom of people trying to escape some war or something, okay,
No,
or poverty. They did this. They did it in Europe with the Islamicists. They did it in well, different parts of Europe, Sweden, Germany, and go read the stories about these places, how these people would come in and rape women because they're not Muslim or whatever, or they're wearing the wrong attire, blah blah blah. There's some horrifying stories out there, but you're not getting it through our media. Okay.
no,
So
no.
go read those stories. Mass immigration is how you help to destabilize a country because the people that you help to come in, they will end up turning and voting for you. Okay. They will
It's
put you in
called
power.
yeah, and that is called multiculturalism. And then
Yes.
suddenly, you know, you and I discussing this, we get called racist,
Right.
which is it's great that you and I are actually having this discussion. And the fact that we then have to go back to Nimrod. Nimrod was the first person that was trying to create multiculturalism by building a tower to attack God. So God then turns around and goes, well, hold on a minute, that's not going to happen again. We're going to create nations, give different languages and the division and all the rest. So
Yes.
that has to be borne in mind as well. And of course, this whole thing, the whole programming through the schools and everything. I mean, you're absolutely right, Chris. You're absolutely right. Bang
And,
on the money.
and there's another. You can talk about this as well.
Hmm.
January. Now, listen. Before I say this, don't lose hope. So a lot of stuff we're talking about. Don't lose hope. Don't become a fatalist. Like we can't stop. God has stopped them many times.
Hmm.
They have to operate on God's timetable, not theirs. Okay. So they have all these plots. If God lets it happen, then it happens. But there's something called the global reset, and I'll probably end up talking about this another time. But it's basically where they reset the economy of the globe, and they bring in basically digital currency for everyone. Like like um, like Mark mentioned earlier in the show about depression. Listen, this whole COVID thing, they're using it in different ways. Once the third world falls and they're starving over there now, this was supposed to disrupt our food supply and everything. There are already people starving. Okay, so imagine there's a financial collapse. Our supply chain's all messed up, which Trump is trying to stop that from happening, and you can't get food, right? And you have to have a vaccine to buy or sell. I'm not saying it's the mark of the beast. I'm just saying it's the same kind of connotation there, right? And they do this global reset. Cash that you have in your mattress, in your safe, all worthless. All didn't this happen? Did something like this happen in the Weimar Republic? And they had to throw out all their money. It was worthless. Okay, so that's what they're trying to do. You can elaborate more because you probably have more insight than I do.
No, I mean, Chris, can you still hear me? Because I've
Yes.
just had to charge the phone. No, you're absolutely right. This is the Economic Forum 2020 in June. They had there was a meeting about this, and the voiceover is done by Prince Charles, as he's done today, going on about saving the planet. Well, personally, I'd like to kick him off the planet. Shut up. You
Yeah.
know, all this green rubbish where they're going, oh, it's climate change, climate change. The climate, it's in God's hands and it naturally goes up and it naturally goes down. Now, am I a bit of an environmentalist? Yes. Do I want to see plastic bags in seas and stuff like that? No. That is the foundation of what the Greenpeace movement is about. And then, as the ex-leader of Greenpeace, whose name I've forgotten, who wrote a book about this and how it was then hijacked, and then it became anti-humanity, anti-human. Now, we are called to go out and subdue the earth. We are also called to go out there and make disciples of all nations, not converts, but disciples.
Yeah.
Now, The fact is, you're absolutely right. The fourth revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, where Boris Johnson in January went to a meeting in Africa with African leaders, and people are going, well, we need to stop giving aid to the coal industry, and then we want to stop giving aid to the oil and gas industry. Well, I'll tell you what. So what we want to do is to make everyone freeze to death in certain parts of the northern hemisphere where they can't keep warm, and then we don't want people burning timber if they're in certain cities in open fires and all this kind of nonsense. I mean, for crying out loud, you're absolutely right. It's about total and utter control, and history is being written by the victors, Mr. President. And what happens is that all this revisionist history, none of
Yes.
this history has been explained in regard to the Weimar Republic and all the rest. And in regard to that, in regard to Germany in the Second World War, we have to go back to the Treaty of Versailles, which in many ways set up the pain of what was then going to go on with Germany spiritually as well. But we also have to remember that the church within Germany at that time, it turned the other way. You had people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer speaking out. We've just had an ex-archbishop that come to mind in a minute, who, was on an Extinction Rebellion march. We've even had, the present Archbishop of Canterbury going, well, there may be some statues we have to pull down and all this. And then we've seen the bishops pushing this whole environmental Marxist socialist speak. Well, I'll tell you what, it's okay for them. They're still getting their salary. I'm not, A
Yeah.
load of other people in this country are
Yeah.
not. A number of people have not been getting paid 4 months. They're not receiving any money whatsoever. So we have all of this factor going on, and you're absolutely right, because if you take Antifa, I know we're going all over the place, but if you take Antifa, the essence of that was then founded in 1932-33. They are the left-wing communist thugs. It's exactly the same. Look at the flag. Look at what it stands for. Go back to the roots. We have to remind ourselves of this, of how things are twisted. So let's go straight back to American history. The Republican Party was founded in 1837 to get Black Americans into the political process. We then have to remember that the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, was founded by the Democratic Party. It's this twist, even though they turn around and say, oh, it was the Republicans that did this. No. Let's come up to date. Let's come up to date even now. So when Eisenhower made a speech in 1960, when he said, he was giving caution about the military-industrial complex, he missed out one word, as my dear friend Kevin Shipp pointed out to me in an interview 2 weeks ago we did with him, where Kevin's the CIA whistleblower, go and look him up. Kevin said that there was a word that Congress told Eisenhower to take out, which was, it was supposed to say the military industrial congressional complex. Right?
Yeah.
Eisenhower said that. JFK comes in. JFK then gave a speech, I think in 1962, at a famous hotel in New York. And there he's turning round and going, we are not a country of secret societies. And then in 1963, as you quite rightly pointed out, a few number of minutes ago, he gets taken out because the CIA, Dulles, then the head of the CIA, wasn't very, very happy with Mr. JFK. I'm not saying it was down to him. Who knows? We can only conjecture. But when JFK goes, I'm going to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces. The CIA, which was OSS that became the CIA, Kevin Shipp told me this. There's in a documentary. If you haven't seen the documentary that Kevin plays a very big part of, which is called Out of the Shadows, then see it. And there's another very good documentary you need to see, which is Pandemic. That's your other homework. And the other documentary you need to see is Shadowgate by Millie Weaver. See those three documentaries and suddenly you will be educated. But Kevin Shepherd said a very, very important thing. He talked about the fact that Heinrich Himmler's staff car is buried on a CIA base in America. How come? How come? How come? And you pointed to this. The scientists under Operation Paperclip taken into America. You talk about that. And Vernon von Braun, of course, as we've said, head of Hitler's rocketry, then becomes head of NASA. And his deputy, whose name I've forgotten, talks about, and I think Steve Quayle makes a huge reference to this. Steve has done so much work in this regard. Talks about the fact that they held seances on the runway, on the launch pad of spaceships and missiles going up and all the rest. And in a very, very good book by Annie Jacobsen, where she talks about Project Paperclip, she shows a picture of the V2 rocket taking off on American soil, a V2 rocket. The V2s were launched from Germany or from France across the English Channel to attack London. And we have to say this, Chris, because of the occult practice. They talked about Vernon von Braun, etc. The scientists talked about the fact that they got their technology from the other side. They got it from fallen angels. So we go to Genesis 6, verses 1 to 8. The fallen angels came down to earth and had sex with human women. It says that in the Bible, but that is not taught. It's not explained. And once you read those verses, the whole of the Old Testament comes alive in a totally and utterly different way.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And that information right there was suppressed for a couple of hundred years. I guess they didn't want us to know that, right? And now that information on Genesis 6 is resurging again and it's becoming very popular because it makes sense. But all of this is pointing towards Bible prophecy, the second return. I mean, the return of Jesus Christ, and people need to focus on learning their Bible. All of this history is great. Learn your history, learn some of these things. But if you don't have your Bible intact if it's not in your heart, your soul, and you don't know God's message to us, you won't understand a lot of this stuff. There are Mormons that know a lot of this stuff, but they're still Mormons, So the point is, great information, but get into the Word of God, because that's God is in total control. He's laid out some stuff for us, historical things as well. Everything in life is laid out in the Bible. And so there is a spiritual realm, as Mark is talking about, and I've laid out in a couple of my teachings about how these demonic or fallen angels have led humanity. These civilizations that got wiped out, like the Incas, and all these, they were worshiping demons. I mean, come on, this is why we got mythology, right? And it got these places got so depraved, so bad, that they were doing human sacrifices, having all sorts of orgies with children as well. Okay, invited the kids. Where do we see society going? Some of you might not have a clue what I'm talking about, but we see a rise in depravity on our TVs, in our music, in our schools, because we've pretty much handed over, for the most part, not totally, America to Satan. We're reflecting his character now, and if we keep letting it go that way, I mean, I really don't want to see where it goes. Okay, you don't want to become like these civilizations that got wiped out. I don't know why America isn't mentioned in Bible prophecy. It could be that we're there, but we're just not as strong, and we're finally swallowed up by the NWO. But the whole thing is on Israel. The two legs, which is Rome. Then Rome gets mixed with some weird stuff that becomes the 10 toes, and iron mixed with miry clay. Some people tell me that's coming back to the Nephilim issue. And then Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, so will be in the coming of the Son of Man. So that's a lot of hints there: violence, genetic manipulation, a whole slew of issues. And I just want you to keep paying attention to these segments that we're bringing out. The reason why we're doing this is we want to, a lot of time we jump all over the place, but then we have segments that really focuses in on an issue so that you can follow, you can do your own research. Hey, I make mistakes. I could be wrong, but I tell you this, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not trying to lie to you to get views, to get money or whatever. This is a ministry, and Mark isn't trying to lie to you. He's actually a director, right? Director or producer?
Producer
of films,
film
and
producer. Yeah.
he'll be coming back to talk to us on what's called Don't Let Them Burn presents the Hollywood Matrix. So look out for that. That's another segment where we do the movie reviews, we explain some things in the films, and look at occult Hollywood and other places around the world that are doing films that you might not even know of. So with that, Mark, how can people find you and get in contact with you?
Very kind of you. Thanks, Chris. Well, people can find me on marksutherland.org. I am on Facebook at the moment, but I think that's all going to change very, very shortly. And hopefully we'll then find me on MeWe and maybe on Parler and all the rest. But you can contact me through marksutherland.org, my website.
All right.
And I would be delighted if people did and viewed a film called Between Lambs and Lions and the Iris Echo.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? Regarding this conversation, tell them about the Iris Echo and, what it's all about.
The Iris Echo was like a prophetic warning on communism. I never meant it to be prophetic on one level, but I could see a certain direction of travel, and I was led to make that, to produce that. So it's a warning about communism, my brother, totally. So it's on my website. Go and see it. Go and share it, please, far and wide. Write a comment underneath. It's on Vimeo, then on Between Lambs and Lions. Write a comment under that. I'll be very, very grateful, and share it. So, yeah.
All right. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me, Mark. Great conversation. We got to do it again.
Thank you. Yes.
Listen, if you're saved out there, just remember, spread the gospel. Don't let the lost burn. And so with that, thanks for joining us. This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn and Mark Sutherland on The Political Edge, episode 1.
If you like our videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all our frequent updates.